My name is Nicole, I'm 31, and for the past 6 years, I've basically been the human equivalent of a GoFundMe campaign for my cousin Ashley's medical degree. While I was busting my butt, climbing the corporate ladder in Chicago, putting in crazy hours, and sacrificing promotions that required relocation, Ashley was supposedly hitting the books at a prestigious and insanely expensive medical school in Switzerland. At least, that's the story my aunt and uncle and Ashley herself sold me. I wasn't just the supportive cousin. I was the primary benefactor, the one draining my savings, taking out personal loans, and putting my own life on hold so she could achieve her dream of becoming a brilliant surgeon. Turns out, the only thing Ashley was dissecting was my bank account. The medical school? A complete fabrication. The tuition fees? Funding a lifestyle of European travel, designer shopping sprees, and champagne brunches, all meticulously documented on a secret Instagram account I wasn't supposed to find. And my dear aunt and uncle? They weren't just clueless enablers, they were active participants in the scam. Living vicariously through the lie was funding. When I uncovered the truth, buried under layers of fake transcripts and photoshopped acceptance letters, they didn't apologize. They threatened me. They told me to keep quiet, to protect the family image. They thought I'd just swallow the betrayal, like I swallowed all their other lies. They forgot I work in risk management. They forgot my entire job is about uncovering deception and calculating consequences. And they seriously underestimated how creative I could get when it came to collecting on a debt with interest. This is how I went from being their fool to the architect of their spectacular downfall. Growing up, Ashley and I were inseparable, more like sisters than cousins. Our moms were sisters, and we lived just a few blocks apart in a quiet, middle-class suburb. Ashley was a year younger, blonde, bubbly, and possessed a kind of effortless charm that made people want to give her the world. I was the serious one, the quiet bookworm, the planner. We balanced each other out. While she was dreaming up adventures, I was figuring out how to make them happen. Our paths started to diverge in high school. I buckled down, focused on academics, determined to get scholarships and build a secure future. Ashley floated. She was smart, undeniably, but lacked focus. Her grades were mediocre, her interests shifted weekly, and she had a knack for charming her way out of consequences. My parents, practical and hardworking, pushed me towards stability. Ashley's parents, my Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark, treated her like a delicate orchid who couldn't possibly handle the harsh realities of, say, a part-time job or a student loan application. She's just finding herself, Aunt Carol would say with a doting smile whenever Ashley dropped another extracurricular or changed her college major for the third time. She's got that artistic temperament. I went off to Northwestern, majoring in finance, working 2 jobs to minimize my debt. Ashley bounced between community colleges before finally, miraculously, announcing her true calling. She wanted to be a doctor. Specifically, a pediatric surgeon. It seemed wildly out of character, but she spoke about it with a newfound passion that was hard to dismiss. She buckled down, retook some science courses, and started studying for the MCATs. Then came the, quote, acceptance letter. It arrived my senior year of college, just as I was drowning in final exams and job interviews. Ashley burst into my dorm room, waving a thick, cream-colored envelope with an impressive-looking crest. "I got in," she shrieked, jumping up and down. I actually got in. The Zurich International Medical University. Zurich? Switzerland? It sounded incredibly prestigious, incredibly expensive. "Wow, Ash," I stammered, genuinely impressed, despite my surprise. "That's amazing. How are you going to afford it?" Her face fell slightly. "Well, that's the thing," she said, pulling out a financial aid statement that listed astronomical tuition fees, easily 6 figures per year. "Mom and Dad are going to help as much as they can, but it's a lot. They said they might have to take out a second mortgage." My heart sank. Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark were not wealthy. He was a high school history teacher. She worked part-time at the library. A second mortgage would cripple them. Over the next few weeks, the pressure campaign began, subtle at first, then increasingly direct. Aunt Carol would call me, her voice trembling with worry. "We just don't know how we'll manage, Nicole. But this is Ashley's dream. We can't let her lose it." Uncle Mark, usually quiet and stoic, would sigh heavily during family dinners, talking about the stress of it all. Ashley herself would send me long, tearful emails about how much this meant to her, how she was finally on the right path, how she couldn't bear the thought of letting her parents down. I had just landed my first real job, an entry-level analyst position at a major financial firm in Chicago. The starting salary felt like a fortune, but I knew Chicago was expensive, and I had my own student loans to tackle. Yet the image of my aunt and uncle losing their home, of Ashley losing her dream, gnawed at me. She was family. We had grown up together. How could I not help? Okay, I finally told them during a tense Sunday dinner. I can help. I'll send what I can each month towards her living expenses. But the tuition, that's on you guys. A wave of relief washed over the table. Aunt Carol wept. Uncle Mark clasped my hand. Ashley threw her arms around me. Thank you, Nicky, she cried, using my childhood nickname. You're literally saving my life. And so began the Swiss Dream Fund. I set up an automatic transfer, $500 a month, directly to Ashley's Swiss bank account. She claimed the university required it. It was a significant chunk of my take-home pay, forcing me to live frugally, brown bagging lunches, and skipping happy hours with my new colleagues. But seeing Ashley's beaming photos on social media, posing in front of snowy alpine peaks, studying in picturesque libraries, wearing a crisp, white lab coat, a prop I would later realize, made it feel worthwhile. She seemed genuinely happy, finally focused. As the years passed, my career took off. I was good at my job. Analytical, meticulous, with a knack for spotting hidden risks. I got promoted quickly, moving into risk management. My salary increased significantly, and so did the demands from my family. The $500 a month wasn't enough. Ashley needed money for specialized textbooks, for lab fees, for mandatory research trips to Florence or Prague. Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark always seemed to have an unexpected shortfall in their contribution to her tuition. The second mortgage payments were killing them. Nicole, honey, could you just cover this one extra expense? Aunt Carol would plead. Ashley's working so hard. We don't want her to worry about money. Nicky, just float us a couple grand until Mark gets his summer school paycheck? Uncle Mark would ask, his voice full of feigned helplessness. Each time, I said yes. I dipped into my savings. I put off buying a car. I kept renting a small one-bedroom apartment when my colleagues were buying condos. My own dreams, traveling, maybe starting my own consulting firm someday, were perpetually deferred, always secondary to the immediate, urgent needs of funding Ashley's education. Then came the promotions I couldn't take. My company offered me a fantastic opportunity in our London office, a significant step up, a chance to gain international experience. But it would mean moving, being further away, potentially disrupting the steady flow of funds to Switzerland. I pictured Aunt Carol's panicked face, Ashley's tearful emails. I turned it down, citing family obligations. A year later, a similar opportunity arose in Singapore. Again, I declined. My boss looked at me, perplexed. Nicole, these are career-making moves. Are you sure? I'm sure, I'd said, the lie tasting like sawdust. My family needs me right here. I even took out a personal loan, $20,000, when Ashley supposedly needed to pay for a specialized surgical rotation, not covered by her regular tuition. The interest rate was killer, but Aunt Carol had been hysterical, talking about how this rotation was crucial for Ashley's residency applications. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere. Ashley's social media posts, while showing beautiful scenery, rarely depicted actual medical school life. Her descriptions of her studies were always vague, full of impressive-sounding jargon but lacking specific detail. When I asked detailed questions about her coursework or professors, her answers were evasive, quickly changing the subject to the amazing fondue she'd had or the charming ski instructor she'd met. My parents, when I visited, seemed less stressed about money than they claimed to be on the phone. There were new gadgets in the house, talk of redoing the kitchen. But I ignored the inconsistencies. I wanted Sinis to believe. Believing meant my sacrifice was meaningful. Believing meant Ashley was finally fulfilling her potential. Believing meant my family wasn't what they were. Denial is a powerful anesthetic. By the time Ashley was supposedly in her final year of medical school, I had poured over $100,000 into the Swiss Dream Fund. My savings account was decimated. I had significant personal loan debt. I was 31 years old, successful on paper, but financially precarious and emotionally exhausted, my own life perpetually on hold. Ashley, meanwhile, was sending emails about residency interviews at prestigious hospitals, sharing photoshopped pictures of herself supposedly scrubbing in for surgery, and talking about the upcoming graduation ceremony. My parents were already planning the lavish graduation party they couldn't afford but expected me to bankroll. The finish line was in sight. Or so I thought. The first crack in the carefully constructed facade appeared 3 months before Ashley's supposed graduation. It was small, almost insignificant. I was applying for a mortgage pre-approval, finally ready to buy a small condo of my own. My credit score, which had always been pristine, came back slightly lower than expected. Not terrible, but lower. Buried in the report were 2 small, unfamiliar credit card accounts, both opened about 18 months prior, both carrying small, consistently paid balances. I called the credit reporting agency, assuming it was an error. "No, Miss Thompson," the agent said politely. "These accounts were opened using your social security number and date of birth. The mailing address is listed as a P.O. box in Cleveland." Cleveland? My parents' city. A cold, sick feeling started in the pit of my stomach. I immediately called the credit card companies. After navigating a maze of automated menus and security questions, I confirmed the worst. The accounts were real. And the authorized user on both? Ashley Thompson. My own cousin had used my identity to open credit cards. Small ones, yes. Paid on time. Likely to build her credit history using Dime's good name. But it was still identity theft. It was still a betrayal. I confronted my Aunt Carol first, deciding to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe Ashley had done this behind everyone's back. "Oh, those?" Aunt Carol said, her voice a little too breezy when I called her. "Yes, Ashley mentioned needing a card for online textbook purchases. Your credit is so much better than hers, Nicole. It was just easier this way. She's been paying the bills herself, don't worry." "Don't worry?" She admitted it, just like that, as if using my identity for convenience was perfectly normal. "Aunt Carol," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "That's illegal. That's identity theft. She opened accounts in my name without my permission." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed. "It's just a little credit card. It's not like she robbed a bank. Family helps family, right?" There it was again. Family helps family. The justification for everything. I hung up, my hand shaking. This wasn't just Ashley. My aunt was complicit. My next step was forensic. My job in risk management had taught me one thing: trust, but verify, especially when things feel off. Ashley's social media presence was carefully curated. Pictures of Zurich, vague references to studying, photos with friends who were never tagged. But people make mistakes, especially people living a lie. I started digging, not on her main Instagram, but deeper. I remembered her mentioning a passion for photography years ago. On a hunch, I searched for photography accounts based in Zurich, using variations of her name, her initials, common pseudonyms. It took hours, scrolling through hundreds of profiles. And then, I found it. An account under the name ashventures_photo. The profile picture wasn't of Ashley, but of a scenic mountain landscape. But the photos were hers. Her style, her eye. And they weren't just of Switzerland. There were pictures from Paris, dated during a time she was supposedly buried in exams. Pictures from Barcelona, captioned "Weekend Getaway," when she was meant to be on that expensive surgical rotation had funded. Pictures from Morocco, from Greece, from Iceland. It was a highlight reel of a glamorous, globe-trotting lifestyle, filled with expensive meals, designer clothes, and luxurious hotels. There wasn't a single photo of a hospital, a textbook, or anything remotely related to medical school. My breath caught. I scrolled further back, my heart pounding. And then I saw it. A group photo, taken on a beach in Thailand, dated 4 years ago, during her first supposed year of medical school. Ashley was beaming, tanned, holding a cocktail, surrounded by a group of laughing, carefree backpackers. The caption read, *6 months into my gap year and never looking back. #Wanderlust, #freedom, #sorry not sorry, mom and dad, Dakshan Nibes gap year saw it. Not medical school. It wasn't just a recent deception. It had been a lie from the very beginning. The Zurich International Medical University didn't exist outside of her imagination and a few cleverly forged documents. The entire edifice, the entire reason for my sacrifice, was a complete and utter fraud. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The air in my apartment felt thick, suffocating. I stumbled to the bathroom and threw up, the bitter taste of bile mixing with the even more bitter taste of betrayal. $100,000. 6 years of my life, countless sacrifices, all of it flushed down the drain of my cousin's elaborate, selfish fantasy. And my aunt and uncle, had they known all along? Had they been complicit in this from the start? The sorry not sorry mom and dad hashtag seemed to answer that question. I spent the rest of that day in a daze, oscillating between a blinding white-hot rage and a numb, hollow despair. I pulled up the emails Ashley had sent me over the years, the desperate pleas for money, the detailed descriptions of fictional exams and rotations, the photoshopped pictures. It was all there, a meticulous, 6-year campaign of manipulation. I thought about calling them, screaming, demanding answers. But what was the point? They would just lie more, gaslight me, twist the narrative, until I doubted my own sanity. No, this required a different approach. This required strategy. This required the cold, calculating precision I used every day in my job. I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop, not for a client risk assessment, but for my own. I began documenting everything. Every dollar I had sent, every loan I had taken out, every promotion I had declined. I gathered the evidence of the fraudulent credit cards. I took screenshots of the @ashventures_photo Instagram account, saving every incriminating picture, every revealing caption. And then, I thought about Grandpa Joe's will. The clause. Financial fraud committed by one beneficiary against another. Ashley, my aunt, and my uncle were all beneficiaries of his modest but significant trust, the same trust that had provided my seed money. Using my identity to open credit cards was undoubtedly fraud. Lying about medical school to solicit over $100,000 under false pretenses? That felt pretty fraudulent too. A cold, hard plan began to form in my mind. They thought I was the fool, the naive, trusting cousin they could easily manipulate. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had forgotten that my entire career was built on identifying risk and mitigating it. Sometimes, ruthlessly. They wanted a show, I would give them one. But it wouldn't be the one they expected. The next few weeks were a masterclass in controlled fury. On the surface, I played my part. I responded to my family's emails and calls with polite, non-committal enthusiasm about Ashley's upcoming graduation. I even sent a small, generic gift, a fancy pen, feigning excitement for her future career. Inside, I was meticulously building my case, preparing for the detonation. I contacted Uncle Michael again. When I laid out the full extent of Ashley's deception, the fake medical school, the secret Instagram, the fraudulent credit cards, the 6 years of lies, even his usually unflappable demeanor cracked. He was silent for a long moment, then let out a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. "That girl," he finally said, his voice tight with anger. "And Carol and Mark, they knew? They let this happen?" "It looks that way," I said quietly. "The evidence is pretty damning." "Damning is an understatement," he growled. "This isn't just immoral, it's criminal. Identity theft, wire fraud. This goes way beyond the trust clause, Nicole." "I know," I said, "but invoking the trust clause is the cleanest, fastest way to hit them where it hurts. Financially. It avoids a public, messy criminal trial, but it still delivers a powerful consequence." Uncle Michael thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. Your grandfather built that clause for exactly this kind of betrayal. It's poetic, in a dark way. Okay, give me everything you have. We need to build an airtight case for forfeiture." I handed over the thick file I had compiled. Bank statements, loan documents, screenshots, timelines. Uncle Michael, back in his lawyerly element, began drafting the formal notice of forfeiture, a legal document outlining the evidence and invoking the specific clause in Grandpa Joe's trust. Meanwhile, the date of Ashley's supposed graduation approached. My parents were in full celebration mode, planning a massive party at their house. They expected me to fly in, to be the proud, supportive cousin, to help foot the bill for the caterer and the champagne. "Nicole, honey," my mother called, her voice full of forced cheerfulness. "We're trying to finalize the budget for Ashley's party. Could you give us an idea of how much you were planning to contribute?" The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted me to pay for the celebration of a lie that had cost me over $100,000. "Actually, Mom," I said, my voice sweet as poison, "I won't be able to make it to the party. Something unavoidable has come up." "Not come?" she gasped. "But Nicole, it's Ashley's graduation. From medical school. You have to be there." "No," I said simply. "I don't. And neither will Ashley technically. Since, Zurich International Medical University doesn't actually exist." There was a stunned, dead silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head as she tried to process what I had just said. What are you talking about?" she finally stammered. "I know, Mom," I said, letting the coldness seep into my voice. "I know everything. The fake school, the 6 years of lies, the trips, the shopping, the Instagram account. I know about the fraudulent credit cards Ashley opened in my name. I know you and Dad knew. And I know you helped her." Her sputtering denials were pathetic, easily cut off. "Save it," I said. "It's too late. You should all expect to hear from Uncle Michael very soon. He has some interesting news regarding Grandpa Joe's trust." I hung up before she could respond. The explosion must have been immediate. Within an hour, my phone was blowing up. My aunt, my uncle, Ashley, all leaving frantic, panicked voicemails. I didn't listen. Uncle Michael served them with the formal notice of forfeiture the next day. The document legally required them to respond within 30 days, either challenging the evidence or accepting the forfeiture of their inheritance, a sum totaling close to $500,000 combined. It also strongly advised them to seek independent legal counsel. The family grapevine went into hyperdrive. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years started calling, wanting to know what was going on. I kept my responses brief and factual. Ashley, Carol, and Mark engaged in significant financial fraud against me for 6 years. I have irrefutable proof. Grandpa Joe's will has specific consequences for such actions. Uncle Michael is handling it. The narrative quickly shifted. The initial shock and disbelief among the extended family turned to outrage as the details emerged. People who had once doted on Ashley, who had praised her brilliance, were now appalled by the depth and audacity of her deception. My parents, who had always basked in the reflected glory of their perfect daughter and sister-in-law, were suddenly finding themselves socially isolated, their phones going unanswered. Ashley, predictably, went into meltdown mode. She bombarded me with texts, alternating between tearful apologies. "I'm so sorry, Nicky. I never meant for it to go this far." And vicious accusations. "You're ruining my life. You're just jealous." I didn't respond to a single one. A week before the 30-day deadline, Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark showed up unannounced at my Chicago apartment building. They couldn't get past the doorman, but they called me from the lobby, their voices frantic. "Nicole, please," Aunt Carol sobbed into the intercom. "You can't do this. This inheritance is all we have for our retirement. Ashley made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but she's still family." "Was I family when you were helping her forge documents and lie to me for 6 years?" I asked coldly through the speaker. "Was I family when you knew she was using my identity to open credit cards?" "You made your choices, Aunt Carol. Now you get to live with them. We'll pay you back," Uncle Mark pleaded. "We'll figure something out. Just don't take the inheritance." "Pay me back?" I laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. "With what? Ashley doesn't have a job. You don't have savings. It would take you the rest of your lives to pay back what you stole. The forfeiture is the repayment. It's the consequence Grandpa Joe wisely put in place for exactly this kind of betrayal. Goodbye." I cut off the intercom and instructed the doorman not to allow them access again. They didn't challenge the forfeiture. Their lawyer likely told them they didn't have a leg to stand on. On the 31st day, Uncle Michael received confirmation. They had signed the papers, acknowledging the fraud and accepting the loss of their inheritance as stipulated by the trust. The $500,000 was redistributed among the remaining beneficiaries, myself and 2 other cousins who lived out of state and had wisely kept their distance over the years. It wasn't a victory that felt triumphant. It felt quiet and heavy and deeply, profoundly sad. I hadn't wanted to destroy them. I had just wanted them to stop destroying me. The forfeiture of the inheritance was the financial equivalent of a nuclear bomb detonating in their lives. My Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark, who had been counting on that money for a comfortable retirement, were suddenly facing a bleak future. They had the house, but the second mortgage they had taken out for Ashley's fictional tuition was still a heavy burden. Uncle Mark had to postpone his retirement indefinitely. Aunt Carol had to find a full-time job, a shock to her system, after decades of part-time library work. Ashley's world imploded even more spectacularly. Without the steady stream of cash from me, and now cut off from any future inheritance, her glamorous European fantasy evaporated overnight. She had no degree, no job history beyond flimsy temp work, and a credit report that was likely a disaster zone. The fraudulent cards in my name were closed, but who knew what other debts she had racked up? She was forced to move back home into her parents' now tense and financially strained household. The Instagram account, ashventures_photo, went dark. The social fallout was just as brutal. In our relatively small suburban community, the story spread like wildfire. The initial sympathy for Ashley, the brilliant medical student whose cousin was suing her, quickly curdled into shock and disgust as the truth emerged. My aunt and uncle, once respected members of the community, became social pariahs. People crossed the street to avoid them. Invitations to neighborhood barbecues and book clubs dried up. My own parents were caught in the awkward crossfire. They were torn between their loyalty to Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, and their dawning, horrified realization of the magnitude of the deception they had passively enabled for years. They tried to mediate, suggesting, quote, family meetings and healing conversations. I shut it down immediately. "There is nothing to discuss," I told my mother firmly. "They committed fraud. They faced the consequences stipulated in Grandpa Joe's will. End of story. If you choose to continue associating with people who deliberately and maliciously harmed your own daughter, that is your choice. But do not expect me to participate." It was the first time I had ever set such a hard boundary with my own parents. To my surprise, they seemed to respect it. Perhaps witnessing the complete implosion of Carol and Mark's lives had finally served as a wake-up call. Our relationship became strained, quieter, but also, strangely, more honest. The pretense was gone. A few months after the forfeiture, I received a handwritten letter. It was from Ashley. It wasn't the rambling, manipulative screed I had expected. It was short, painfully awkward and surprisingly real. Nicky, asterisk it began, using the old nickname. I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did was wrong. Not just a mistake, but fundamentally, deeply wrong. I was a coward, and I was greedy, and I let the lie get bigger and bigger until it consumed everything. I took your money, your trust, and your kindness, and I threw it all away on things that didn't matter. I know sorry isn't enough. But I am. Truly. I'm working now. Stocking shelves at a grocery store. Glamorous, I know. I'm gonna start paying you back, even if it takes me the rest of my life. You deserved better. I hope someday, maybe, you can find a way to move forward. Ashtono. I read the letter several times. Was it genuine remorse, or just another manipulation? I didn't know, but for the first time, it didn't feel like my responsibility to figure it out. Her journey, her repayment, her path forward, that was hers to navigate now. My role in her story was over. I folded the letter and put it away in a drawer, unanswered. My own path forward was becoming clearer. The forfeiture didn't just bring financial restitution, it brought a profound sense of closure. The weight of their expectations, their manipulations, their lies, it was finally gone. I felt lighter, freer, than I had in years. I took the promotion I had been offered in the London office. My boss was thrilled, if a little surprised by my sudden change of heart. I sold my condo in Chicago, packed my bags, and moved across the Atlantic. London was a revelation. It was a city buzzing with energy, history, and a million new possibilities. My new role was challenging, demanding, but incredibly rewarding. I was good at it. I was valued for my skills, my intellect, my contributions, not for my willingness to be a doormat. I traveled. I explored Europe on weekends, finally seeing the places Ashley had only pretended to study near. I sent postcards home, not to my parents or my aunt and uncle, but to Uncle Michael, to my few loyal friends, and to Grandpa Joe's grave, a silent thank you to the man whose foresight had ultimately given me back my life. I even started dating again, meeting a kind, funny architect named Simon who found my story both horrifying and weirdly impressive. For the first time, I felt like I could build a future based on honesty and mutual respect, not on secrets and sacrifices. It's been 3 years since I moved to London. My life is unrecognizable from the one I was living back in Chicago, trapped in the web of my family's making. I'm now a vice president in my firm's European division. I travel frequently for work: Paris, Rome, Berlin, ironically echoing the fictional itinerary Ashley once flaunted. But my travel is real, earned through hard work, not deception. I bought a small, bright flat in Notting Hill, filling it with art and books and things that bring time joy. My catering business back home? I sold it to my capable assistant manager, using the proceeds and a portion of the redistributed trust money to help her expand. It felt good to pass on the opportunity, to invest in someone else's dream, cleanly and honestly. My relationship with my parents remains distant, but cordial. We exchange emails on birthdays and holidays. They seem to have accepted my boundaries, perhaps because they have no other choice. They never mention Ashley or my aunt and uncle. It's an unspoken truce, a fragile peace built on the ruins of the past. Ashley, according to the occasional update from distant cousins, is still working low-wage jobs, still living with her parents. She apparently makes small, regular payments into an account Uncle Michael set up for restitution, though at her current rate, it will take her decades to repay even a fraction of what she took. Her journey is her own. I harbor no ill will towards her anymore, just a profound, weary sense of detachment. Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark sold their house last year. The second mortgage, combined with the loss of the inheritance and their social standing, proved too much. They moved into a small retirement condo, their lives significantly downsized. Sometimes, a sliver of guilt tries to creep in, whispering that I was too harsh, that I destroyed them. But then I remember the cold calculation in their eyes, the years of deliberate manipulation, the casual disregard for my life and my future. And I know I did what was necessary, not just for me but for the fundamental principle that actions must have consequences. What I didn't expect was the quiet satisfaction that came from finally honoring my own worth. For years I had defined myself by my role in the family, the responsible one, the caregiver, the provider. Breaking free from that role was terrifying, like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. But in the freefall, I discovered something crucial. I could fly. My life now isn't perfect. There are still challenges, stresses, moments of doubt, but it is mine. Every success, every failure, every choice is my own. I am no longer living in service to someone else's dream, someone else's lie. I am the architect of my own life, building it slowly, carefully, on a foundation of truth and self-respect. And that foundation, I have learned, is unshakable.